How can you be frugal and still save even during a time of recession? Well, here's the truth. We're saving money. We're going to tell you how we do it, and there are some specific things we do which really aren't as hard as you might think they are.
Hey, in case this is the first time you are with us, I'm Larry.
And I'm Hope.
And we're from Under the Median, where every week we bring you 2 videos on practical frugality.
All right, let's get right into the topic for today's video. Larry, what's the first thing that frugal people do that helps them save money?
Well, frugal people know their priorities.
They know exactly what is important to them. This is incredibly individualized, but it helps the process if you will just sit down and make a list of the 3 things that are most important to you and your family.
And the next point follows right along with that. Have written goals.
We've said time and time again how important that it is to have those goals written down. But not only do they need to be written down, they need to be tracked so you know the progress that you're making on those goals.
Frugal people track their expenses. And you know, this was our first step. It's our first step toward budgeting. So budgeting, tracking your expenses, very critical to being frugal.
4th frugal habit, frugal people are willing to try new things. We are constantly looking at what we do, evaluating and thinking, how can I do that better?
So right now we're looking at a totally different animal when it comes to budgeting. We've got so many other pressures working on us. The inflation, all the prices going up, every area is in demand. The things that we did last year and 2 years ago no longer apply. We have to find new ways of doing things.
The sponsor for today's video is actually responsible for a lot of the challenges that we have taken on when it comes to budgeting and also investing in retirement. And that's John Creekmer from Creekmer Wealth Advisors. We went to John many years ago with a list of really long-term goals was where we were stuck. There's always an area where you feel like I'm just really stuck here. And we walked into his office and said, we have these goals, but literally it seems so big that we don't know exactly how to get started. So he challenged us. He gave us a lot of ideas and said, let's try this and let's evaluate and see how that's going and then figure out how we're going to move on from there. John is actually really, really good at taking a set of goals and breaking it down to really small, easy to manage steps to help you get from where you're at to where you want to be. Now, if you have any questions about budgeting or investing or retirement, shoot John an email. He's super happy just to jump on a quick Zoom call with you, answer your questions. Now, you need to live in the U.S. to work with John, but he'd be happy to hear from you. And there is a link to Creekmer Wealth Advisors in the description of the video. Thanks, John and the team at Creekmer Wealth for sponsoring the video.
Frugal people realize that we don't know everything. We realize that, no one person can have all the answers. So it's always good to seek out other sources to kind of fill in the gaps where you have some.
Frugal people, we tend to read and research I think pretty much all the time.
And frugal people tend to have a wide range of interests.
Yeah,
so we're always looking into maybe some new technology, something that can make our lives easier, simpler, and maybe do something less expensive. Frugal people don't rationalize nickels and dimes that kind of present themselves to spend money on. That all adds up. To me, it's like a little pinhole in a bucket. It doesn't seem like much, but pretty soon that water's all leaked out, even though it's a tiny hole.
Speaking of tiny holes and small amounts of money, the next thing that frugal people do is that we don't mind saving nickels and dimes, and we don't see that as small amounts of money, because what we have figured out is that small amounts of money add up to big money over time. And the more streams of nickels and dimes that we are saving every week, the faster we reach our goals.
Let's say you have 20 money categories, and in each category, you're saving just a little bit of money each month. That's that amount of money times 20. It really adds up.
Frugal people look for quality items at a price that we are willing to pay. I think that's one of the big misunderstandings about frugality is that people see frugality as being the same word as cheap, and it's really not. Frugality isn't about buying the cheapest thing. It's about buying an item that is high quality, but also spending less money on that high quality item than full price. Tell us in the comments section, do you look at frugality that way? Tell us what you think the difference is between being frugal and being cheap.
And as we said before, if you're saving money in all those little small areas that you've tightened up, you'll have money for more expensive things when you want to buy 1 or 2 large dollar items. Frugal people don't pay full price for items. At least we don't like to. We look for sales. We go online, we research. We'll look out several sources that may be offering the same item before we actually land on it.
We also like to find websites, apps, and browser extensions that help us on our quest on saving money. We've got 3 of them that we are really, really liking. 1 is Honey. Number 2 is Fetch. And then we also like Rakuten. Those are the 3 we like most. Tell us what you like in the comments section. And by the way, our top 3 picks, we will have links to those in case you don't already use them. They'll be in the description of this video.
Frugal people watch for sales, and we know and understand the sales cycle.
Yep.
So we're ready for these items when they come around regularly. This is especially true in food, but it also applies to other, hard items that you might need for your home.
We do a lot of research ahead of time, too, to figure out what item that we do want, what make, what model, what features. We do all of that. Frugal people do all of that ahead of time. Now, to give you an example, our washing machine just bit the dust like a month and a half ago. And it was 30 years old, so we paid homage to it for service for 30 years.
That's a long time.
And we put it out to the curb for somebody else to take.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely not fixable at that point. But we already had a really good idea in mind of exactly what we were looking for. We went online, did some research, did some price comparison, and nailed pretty quickly exactly what we were looking for.
And in addition to that, we consulted a friend who works repairing these items for a living, and he said the most reliable brand that he likes is Whirlpool. So we went with his recommendations, and then we found one really cheap at a warehouse. So I actually went directly to a local warehouse to buy it. Saved about $100 off of the normal price just by doing that.
Just that whole process that Larry just explained, that brings me to my next point. And that is the fact that frugal people have a hierarchy of buying. Now, I literally did not know how to explain this tip any other way, but let me give you a really good example. So when we are looking to replace something, of course, the first thing we do is see if it's worthy of being repaired, whether we need to replace it at all. We're going to put a shout out on Facebook to our friends and our family in the area and say, hey, you know what? We're looking to buy one of these things. Let's say it's a television set. And sometimes a friend or family member might say, I got one sitting in my spare bedroom. I never ever use it. You can just have it. So we're going to start at that level. And then if friends and family don't have one, we're going to maybe look on the used market. And if we can't find it on the used market, then it's possible we're going to go ahead and look new. But once again, we're going to do what we did. We're going to do that research. We're going to look for those refunds, those rebates, those coupons, get it at a warehouse, which is what we did, saved ourselves $100. We're going to get the item and we're going to get it for less money. And finally, if we are going to buy retail, we're certainly going to ask them if there is a cash price so we can have a discount for paying cash. That gives you the idea of the hierarchy of purchases that are used by frugal people. And that's the next point, is that frugal people learn to live with delayed gratification. We have figured out that there aren't a whole lot of things in life that are, I need it now. We're willing to wait a little bit to get what we want, once again, at a price we're willing to pay.
Frugal people look down the road. When I was learning how to drive, I had a weird habit. I would look at the end of the fender of the car, and I was kind of eyeing that to the dotted lines as I was passing on the highway, and that was a terrible way to drive. I wasn't looking down the road. My instructor in the first 20 seconds of driving, looked at me. He said, "Where are you looking?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking at the fender and the dotted lines." He says, "No, look down the road. You got to see what's coming down there." And that's what we all need to do as frugal people. We need to look down the road and do some planning for our future. And we're not talking 10, 20 years. This might be just 18 months, 6 months out. It's always good to be looking ahead.
Now, staying in the vein of our experience with driver's ed, I did not look down the road. I didn't even look at the little dot on the side of the road. No, I looked in the next lane to see what people in the next lane were doing. So inevitably, my poor driving instructor, I was veering toward the cars in the next lane. So that is our next point, is that frugal people don't compare what we are doing to what other people are doing. It really doesn't bother us. We just stay in our own lane. Yes, I learned to do that. And to keep moving down the road. You know, the other thing that we do is we actually do pay attention to what the government is telling us is going to happen with inflation and happen with rising prices. We're already looking. In fact, I was just doing a little bit of research on it today on what inflation is expected to do in 2023, because we're looking ahead down the road to our budget for 2023. You know, numbers are numbers, guys, but what we really want to know is how that is going to hit us in our pocketbook.
Yeah, none of us make good decisions in a panic. So that's why if you're looking ahead, watching the trends, you're going to make some good planning. And planning keeps you from freaking out, frankly. And that gets us to our next point. Frugal people are proactive. That means we're taking action and not reaction. We're not reacting to things. We're looking for something to do to get through that situation and not how to just react and respond to it one thing at a time. If you're doing that, or if we're doing that, then we're really not in control of our situation.
Frugal people are not afraid to buy used items. In fact, not only are we not afraid of it, it's like our happy place.
Yeah.
We love to find a great deal and a great bargain on something that has barely been used. So if you're not familiar with the used market, we did a video. It's been quite some time back. It's one of our older videos, but I'm going to make sure that it's linked up above if you haven't watched it, and in the description of this video. We actually gave you our top 10 tips for thrift store shopping. So you might find those tips helpful. Which brings us to our next point, which is frugal people really like to hang out with frugal people.
Yeah.
You know, part of the reason is because we're comfortable with y'all, but part of it is that we can learn so much from one another. And we absolutely do not discount that or take it for granted.
Frugal people avoid the temptation to buy. And one of the ways to avoid that is just not put yourself into the situation of being tempted. Stay away from websites or stores or maybe even people that might influence you to buy things that you don't need. Hope mentioned goals in that last point. And frugal people, as we've kind of mentioned in this video already, we're really very willing to work hard to obtain our goals. It takes a little bit more effort and work to get to where you need to be when you're trying to do it for the least expensive route possible. But the effort is worth it, because in the long term, your money will go much further.
One of the things that frugal people definitely do, and you've maybe kind of caught the idea from some of the things we've said in this video, is that frugal people actually do spend money. And sometimes when we spend money, we spend a lot of money all at once, because we've not frittered away those nickels and dimes. We've saved them all up, but we've saved them for a specific purpose, a specific goal. And then once we have that money ready, we are very ready to lay it down and spend our money on what we want to. Because once again, frugality, not about deprivation. Frugality is about choosing when, where, and how you're going to spend your dollars.
Frugal people know what they own and they use what they have. So you have in your home things that you use on a daily basis, maybe things you use to cook with, things to clean with, things to repair items with. but you don't own too much. What you have, you use. And if we find some things around our house that we're no longer using, we put them up for sale or we donate them and we get rid of them. If we're not using it, we don't need it.
Frugal people have calculated the minimum amount of items that they need to use. Let me give you an idea. We have figured out exactly how many squirts of dish soap that we need in order to do a sink full of dishes. Laundry detergent. Another
Same
great
thing,
example. Once again, we did a whole video on how much laundry detergent you really need to use.
It's a lot less
and it's
than,
a lot less
than they recommend a lot of times. Yeah.
So we know what that amount is, and that's how much we use.
Frugal people make what they have last longer. For instance, in the items of food and condiments. I remember my dad doing this.
Yes.
He'd get down to the end of the ketchup bottle. He actually had a special spoon on a real long handle that he could spoon down in there and grab out some of the remaining ketchup that's in the bottle. But even when the spoon couldn't get it, he'd add just a little bit of water, slush it up, and then pour that out.
We take what we have, we stretch it just a little bit further. Now, there's something else that frugal people actually do with all the items that they own.
Frugal people maintain what they have. I'm a real fan of owner's manuals. When you read an owner's manual on an item, it tells you exactly how that item is designed and how it's intended to be used. And if you use and operate an item within those guidelines, it will last longer. You just want to keep those things maintained so they'll continue to work trouble-free and they'll last a lot longer. You'll spend less money on them.
And one of the most important things that frugal people do, frugal people have a system which allows them to stay on track. There's a couple of different aspects of this.
Well, one of them is checks and balances. And our best check and balance is each other. We bounce things off of each other as to whether a purchase is wise or not. And unless Hope and I are in agreement on that purchase, we don't do it. We have to be in perfect agreement on it, or that we table it. We might look at it, maybe address it later, but we don't act on it unless there's that sense of agreement. And what's the other thing, Hope?
The other thing is, when it comes to systems, we love a good spreadsheet. There's nothing that makes our hearts happier than a really good spreadsheet. We have so many different spreadsheets that we use, from everything from our food budget to menu plans to planning for the final quarter of the year, quarterly budgets, goals. All of those are spreadsheets. Now, if you want to delve deeper into the basics of budgeting with us, we actually have a personal finance planner, and you can take a look at that. There'll be a link to it in the description of this video. But if you really want to know from us is, what does this look like in your real life, day-to-day basics? What does this whole idea of frugality look like? We did a video and we showed you 35 choices that we made in just 1 week that helped us to spend less and save more. And that video, if you haven't watched it, is right over there.